This Impact Wrestling review was brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Try it, and the next time MVP wants to drive a wedge between two top heels, his plan won't somehow end with two babyfaces fighting each other. As you all know, I did not care for last week's Impact. Just was not a good enough show in my opinion, not nearly good enough. So I went into this week kind of feeling like TNA were phoning it in on the tape shows. There wasn't anything I was especially looking forward to, a feeling that only intensified after the opening segment. So I did not have high hopes for this one. But I'll be damned if I didn't start this show feeling one way and finish it feeling an entirely different way. There were some real bright spots here, definite glimpses of the kind of show Impact should be like every week. And I'm mostly talking about the end of the show, because it sure as hell didn't start that way. I will make no bones about it. The opening in-ring promo with MVP, Magnus, Abyss, Samoa Joe, and Eric Young was an absolute fucking mess. Nothing, I repeat, nothing made sense in this segment. First you trot out Magnus and Abyss, and I guess they're doing a JBL Shawn Michaels type of thing because Magnus claims that Abyss no longer works for TNA. Abyss now works exclusively for him. And this just raises all sorts of questions. How did Abyss just magically stop being a TNA employee? Did he quit? Was he fired? When did this happen and why? If Abyss is motivated primarily by money now, like Magnus said after lockdown, and I'm assuming Abyss agreed to this because Magnus made him a better offer, how is it that Magnus can afford to pay him more money than TNA can? None of this is explained. But Magnus basically says that they're joined at the hip now, and you can't get one without the other, and I guess we're just meant to accept this at face value. So MVP decides to try to split them up by tempting Abyss with the world title and pitting them against each other. That's actually a good idea. Unfortunately, it just raises further questions. They just said that Abyss is no longer a TNA employee. He doesn't work for TNA. He works for Magnus. So if Abyss is not under TNA contract, which they basically just said he's not, then how in the blue hell does MVP have the power to book him in wrestling matches? Does that make any fucking sense at all? Oh, but it doesn't stop there. No, we were just getting started. Samoa Joe shows up, and he's outraged about Magnus versus Abyss happening, even though it shouldn't be able to happen, when he still hasn't gotten what he wants, which is a fair one-on-one shot at the world title free of interference. But Joe somehow fails to realize that if that match succeeded in driving a wedge between Magnus and Abyss like it's intended to, that would mean that Abyss might no longer have Magnus's back, which would mean that Joe could then get that fair shot at the world title free of interference. So, basically, Joe is opposing the very thing that could potentially get him exactly what he wants.
Congratulations, you just renewed your idiot license.
Then MVP, in his infinite wisdom, decides to make this a triple threat, essentially putting Joe in a handicap match. Joe doesn't like that either, and quite frankly, it makes MVP look like he's secretly supporting the heels in this situation. Then, if possible, we go even further down the rabbit hole. Eric Young comes out, and he still wants a piece of Abyss. So he insists that the match be made a fatal four-way so he can neutralize Abyss and Joe can be free to tear Magnus a new one and win the world title. But MVP is like, I don't know, Eric. I don't think you've earned that yet. Hasn't earned what? Need I remind you that at no point in this entire segment did Eric Young say that he wanted the world title. Not once. In fact, he pretty much readily endorses Samoa Joe as the guy who should be the one to take the title from Magnus. He doesn't care about the title. All he wants is Abyss. And this raises even more questions. If Eric doesn't care about the title, and you want to keep Abyss away from that whole situation, why the fuck doesn't MVP just book Eric versus Abyss in a separate match? But, oh no, that can't happen, because Abyss works for Magnus now, and he can't even step into the ring without Magnus. Bullshit! If we start pulling threads on this one, then we have to go back to the issue of Abyss not being a TNA employee, which means that MVP should have no power to book him in matches. But since somehow he does, then that should mean that the can't get one without the other policy when it comes to Abyss and Magnus would be null and void as well. But for reasons that no one seems to want to explain, it isn't. Why does one thing apply but not the other? I mean, Jesus Christ, the more you think about this, the less sense it makes.
This whole show is ridiculous!
So eventually the match next week becomes a fatal four-way. But now, Samoa Joe and Eric Young have a burning desire to kick each other's asses, even though, as we just established like 2 minutes earlier, they want the exact same thing. Abyss taken out and Joe winning the world title. That's what they both want. But somehow, don't ask me how, but somehow, we wind up with Joe versus Eric for tonight. So MVP's plan to drive a wedge between the two heels becomes something that will instead drive a wedge between the two faces, and Magnus versus Abyss is suddenly completely forgotten about. So, if I'm clear on everything, what we take away from this segment goes something like this. Samoa Joe and Eric Young want the same things, but are dead set on working against each other because they're morons. MVP is booking matches that will cause the exact opposite of what he's hoping to accomplish because he's a moron. And Abyss does not work for TNA. He now works for Magnus, but only in ways that are convenient to the plot, apparently because someone backstage thinks we're morons.
Oh, my brother! Testify!
Hey TNA, Vince Russo called. He said this opening segment was confusing as all hell and made no damn sense whatsoever.
Your posterior better contact someone at once!
So later on, Magnus and Abyss get the Wolves. It's a solid tag match. The Wolves continue to look great. Then the finish happens, with Eddie putting the submission on Magnus, and Magnus taps out immediately. You know, good for Eddie Edwards. I'm happy for him. But, my God, is this really the best way you can think to book Magnus right now? Really?
Really?
I get that it was strategic. The title wasn't on the line, so he doesn't care about the loss. I get that. But you know what? This is a problem, because he should care. If Magnus doesn't care about losing non-title matches, then why should we care about watching him wrestle non-title matches? And hell, if the match means nothing to him, then why wrestle at all? Why not just walk away as soon as the bell rings and take the count-out loss? I guess the answer is that Magnus will wrestle non-title matches, but if they're hard to win, he'll just quit, because, well, the title's not on the line, so fuck it. I don't like this. I thought the paper champion gimmick was going to be a temporary thing, and he'd eventually prove that he was the real deal in a shocking way that would catch the fans off guard. Instead, it seems like TNA want the fans to think that Magnus is a joke as the world champion because he is one.
Oh, what a bunch of bull.
Why on earth would you want your world champion to have no credibility? This is the guy who ended the TNA careers of Sting and AJ Styles. And instead of using that to push him to the next level, you just threw it away like it meant nothing. You're not going to put any legitimate heat on Magnus if people don't even take him seriously. This just seems so limiting. And when I think about what Magnus accomplished, becoming the first British world champion of a major American wrestling company in 108 years, and what TNA could have potentially done with that, to see them go this route instead just feels like a huge missed opportunity.
You people are fools!
On the plus side, though, I don't think anyone can complain about how the Wolves have been booked so far. Davey and Eddie have been made to look like total badasses. They've very quickly been established as the new alpha dogs of the tag team division, with or without the titles. They've been in high-profile matches, main events, been treated like a big deal. You really get the sense that this is the team the tag division is going to be built around now. Meanwhile, the bromance are filling random spots with no direction whatsoever, and are just sort of killing time with the belts until they change hands for realsies later on. Hopefully soon.
You guys suck.
I'm really of two minds about this beautiful people angle. Angelina was in heel mode now, so the promo was better than last week, even though Velvet Sky as a babyface is just so dull. But it still did nothing for me. I'm so over the Velvet Angelina stuff. The match was nothing special. There was a really badly botched roll-up, and Velvet's offense on Madison was just horrid. And come on, Angelina versus Madison in 2014, who cares? Who cares? That matchup might have been sort of interesting 2, 3, or 4 years ago, but now? Get out of here with that stuff. It's old, it's boring, and I have no desire to see it. And that goes double for the beautiful people getting back together for like the 3rd time now. This is not anything that's going to move the knockout division forward. This is just falling back on a previous gimmick that was already done to death years ago.
And that's the fishing line, 'cause Shark Boy said so.
Now, my personal feelings aside, I will admit there are a few positives in this. For starters, Velvet Sky turned heel, thank fucking God. I always thought Velvet was a terrible babyface, but she does play a good heel. Like Angelina, that seems to be where her charisma shines the brightest. Also, now that she's a part of a duo again, you can go back to featuring Velvet in a prominent yet supporting role where she can showcase her best qualities, sex appeal, personality, and so on, and let Angelina kind of take the lead and cover for her in the ring like she used to. This, to me, is a much more appropriate spot for Velvet Sky to be in, and it's where she was always best utilized in the past before they tried to make her a babyface single star and completely exposed her. Speaking of which, did anyone else find it really ironic that Angelina said Velvet had become bland and vanilla and was nothing without her? And then a few minutes later, Velvet gets back together with Angelina, basically confirming that what she just said was true? If you ever wanted an admission from TNA that Velvet Sky was really not cut out to be a single star, I think you just got it.
This alleged superstar is an unworthy opponent.
All that said, I'm still not interested in this. The Beautiful People gimmick is old news now, when all I really want to see from the Knockouts is something fresh and different. What can the Beautiful People do that they haven't done already? They've both been the champions several times, both feuded with pretty much everybody. About the only new thing they could do at this point would be to help establish Brittany and get her over. Brittany, who debuted by beating Gail Kim in a match and has not been seen or heard from since. Just saying. They teased the Madison thing with her a little bit before, so the Beautiful People versus Brittany and Madison may end up happening. And if the end goal for that is to put Brittany on the map, good. It's not much, but at least it's something. When Bully Ray wasn't just repeating stuff he'd said previously to fill time, this segment with him and Bobby Roode went kind of like this. Do you know who I am? I was the longest reigning World Heavyweight Champion in the history of this company. Fight me. No. Fight me! No, I don't want to. Fight me! Okay, let's fight. So then they fight, and Roode puts Bully through a table. This part was really good, and made me look forward to their eventual match. The talking beforehand kind of just felt like they were stalling to fill time and not really accomplishing anything new. No real complaints about Samoa Joe versus Eric Young. It was a little short, but it was a good match. Unfortunately, the crowd didn't seem to know who to cheer for, so for a lot of the match they cheered for neither of them. That's another Vince Russo trope right there, blurring the lines so much that sometimes the fans have no idea which guy to support. I was really hoping we'd seen the last of that one. This Samuel Shaw-Christy Hemme thing was really convoluted. They show this pre-tape that took place last week of Shaw harassing Christy in a way that would get him instantly fired in any other business, and as a result, Shaw is suspended for 1 week, meaning that he could not appear on this show, even though he did in this pre-tape. But the weird thing is, that pre-tape was filmed last week, after a show that Samuel Shaw did not even appear on. So, he's serving his 1 week suspension during a short period in which he wasn't appearing on television anyway, so in actuality, his punishment amounted to absolutely nothing. Wow, he got off easy.
This is unbelievable. This doesn't make any sense.
Now, when you're talking about stuff on this Impact that ultimately elevated it from good but confusing to something better, you're really talking about two things in particular. The main event and the hunt for Willow. TNA, I demand that you give Ethan Carter III and Rockstar Spud their own spin-off show. These guys are amazing together. They're looking for Willow in some forest out in the ass crack of nowhere. And Spud is wearing all this camouflage and face painted stuff. And then they find the barn and EC3 calls it Operation Human Shield. Oh my god, I was cracking up. I swear, I wanted a whole show of just EC3 and Spud screwing around in the woods. Just the way these guys play off each other, you can't fake chemistry like that, man. This is brilliant.
Rockstar Spud is in the building!
I look forward to these segments every single week. And I'm not trying to compare drawing money or star power or anything like that, but I really think that with EC3 and Rockstar Spud, TNA have something similar to what WWE had with The Rock and Mick Foley back in the day, where they can just put these guys together, let them do whatever the hell they want, and they know they'll get 20 minutes of gold. TNA, please give us more stuff like this. EC3 and Spud together have not had a bad segment yet. These guys are awesome.
The Rockstar Spud has left the building.
It was so great that I didn't even mind the stupidity of the show closing out with Willow beating up EC3 with a freaking umbrella. I mean, really? An umbrella? Is Willow supposed to be like the Penguin, where his umbrella is somehow a deadly weapon in disguise? Willow, ditch the umbrella, okay? That's just silly. And apparently, a certain someone couldn't take a hint. He couldn't quit while he was ahead last week. He just had to keep pushing his luck. So be it. You have no idea what you've done to yourself, Willow. The wrath of wrestling's greatest hero, EC3, will be swift and terrifying. My advice to you, run. Run as fast and as far as you can, Willow, because the new American icon of wrestling is coming for you. And when he catches you, it's not gonna be pretty. I'm not sure when this happened exactly, but at some point, James Storm versus Gunner became, by a wide margin, the best feud in this entire company. And it looks like TNA are starting to realize that because they're treating this like it's a pretty big deal. The pains they went through to make it as personal as they could last week with Storm attacking Gunner's dad. The awesome video packages that hyped up this no DQ match. Plus, the wrestlers going that extra mile to sell the intensity of the whole thing. Like Storm kicking out of the superplex through the chairs that finished him at Lockdown. Gunner spearing Storm through the ropes to put him through a table. Kicking out of 2 last calls and then breaking out a new finisher to beat Storm again. This was great. I thought this was easily one of Gunner's best matches in TNA yet, if not his best match. And certainly one of the best TV main events we've seen on this show in quite a while. And best of all, it had a satisfying finish and payoff at the end, which is something that I think has really been lacking in the main event feuds recently. I do wish James Storm had gone over here, though. I don't know how much longer they can keep this feud going if he keeps losing to Gunner all the time. It's sacrifice, maybe. If the goal here is just to elevate Gunner, okay, but this thing would have more legs if Storm could get a win over him once in a while. Also, they're really running the well dry on gimmicks here. They've had a briefcase on a pole match, a last man standing cage match, and now a no DQ match. Have they even had a regular match yet? That might be a good thing to try at some point. Just saying. This was kind of a skewed Impact in that, with the exception of the women's match, most of the wrestling was solid to great, but a lot of the stuff on the creative end just left me horribly confused and kind of frustrated. But there were some hilarious comedy segments with EC3 and Spud, and the main event really ended the show strong. So, while I'm not forgiving any of the creative blunders and plot holes that felt like the writers just rushed out the script in 20 minutes and gave it to the production team without proofreading it first, I actually ended up feeling pretty good about this one. Not perfect, but a lot better than last week. Over. Out.